The words that come to my mind is dangerously disembodied. Like we're moving so fast that the consequences of that are everywhere in our lives. And if we actually connect to our bodies, we will be forced to slow down. Where that becomes tricky, and there's a hard sell there, is oftentimes people have a conception, if I do slow down, I connect to myself, I know my inner voice, I'm going to be less successful, achieve less, I'm not going to meet my goals, XYZ is going to happen to my body, which isn't true. It's actually the striving and the pushing and the doing more that's creating more of the stress and more of the problem and more of the chaos that follows you. And when we actually slow down, we have more capacity to achieve more. One of my favorite teachers, she would always say to me, a meditation teacher, slow down, you'll get there faster. And then nothing has been more true in my life than those words.
Welcome to Healing Honeys, the podcast for girls with big dreams trying to balance it all. I'm Louise Rumble, serial entrepreneur, type A overachiever, healing girly, and holistic wellness coach who also once got called the Jesus of modern dating. But let's get one thing straight. My healing era has never been calm. I'm talking savage dating stories, 20 cigarettes a day, daddy issues, an anxious attachment style, and an autoimmune disorder too. Today, I've spent thousands of dollars on healing and therapy, and now I'm here to guide you, love you, and laugh with you as I share my favorite tips, tricks, and rituals that have saved me along the way. With new episodes every Wednesday, expect girl talk, psychology, and the nervous system, as well as love, sex, and dating, wellness, fitness, and a little bit of business and spirituality too. So get in, honey. We are balancing healing, hustling, and life, and the best is yet to come. And if you're looking for ad-free listening or my Somatic Healing Subscription Daily Devotion, just head over to the show notes. Now, let's get into it. Hi, my honeys, and welcome back to another episode. This one is one that I have been meaning to release forever. It's very poignant, it's very special, and it's been a while since I really stepped into the therapy space, the healing space, the somatic space. And this episode covers it all. I think people have always said to me that often they feel like therapists themselves are clinical or cold or perfect, or people feel like their therapist is going to be judging them. And I hope in today's episode, Ailey will show you that even therapists themselves have gone through so much. And often that is what has taken them into the therapy room. Today's episode is very special. We also talk a lot about somatics, which I know a lot of people are still not really familiar with. And when I hosted my live event with Aloe in London a couple of weeks ago, I asked people to put their hands up if they knew what somatics was. And honestly, only like 2 or 3 people in the room actually knew. And today we dive into that. And really, I just want you to remember that somatics is about slowing down and coming back into our body in a world and a life that constantly has us looking at other people, thinking about other people, scrolling and being outside of our body, being disembodied, being in our heads. Thinking, and analyzing rather than feeling. So if you do feel called to step into the somatic space, my monthly healing subscription daily devotion is full of 100 and more rapid rituals. Everything is 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes long, from somatic Pilates through to breath work, through to EFT tapping. It is fun. It is beautiful. And a 7-day free trial is waiting for you in the show notes. If you join this month, you will also get access to my free money magnet challenge that I am holding in just a couple of weeks. So I wanted to share that because I know it's often difficult to know where to start. I know that many of us can't afford one-on-one somatic therapists or EMDR, or even just therapy in general. Sessions are normally $80 to $200 an hour. So I created a solution so you can start healing and really continue that happiness glow up from the inside out from your living room. But let's get into this. It's a beautiful, intelligent, intricate episode that I can't wait for you to experience. Enjoy. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Healing Honeys podcast. I am so excited for today's episode. I have wanted this guest to join me Ever since I discovered her on Instagram, I was like, she's amazing. And then when I went on her website to prepare for today's episode, I was literally blown away by Ailey's qualifications, and just what she's going to share with us today is going to be so amazing. And yes, Ailey Jolie, I'm so happy to have you here with me today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, to get to spend this time with you and hopefully trickle in some wisdom for your listeners.
So much wisdom. I mean, all you have to do is go on your Instagram page, and I'm just like, damn, truth bomb, truth bomb, truth bomb. And when I was planning today's episode, I was like, this is one of those guests that we could do a 4-hour podcast because there's so much to discuss. But we're going to get right into it. I guess before we do, how would you describe yourself?
Yeah, so the work that I do now is as a somatic therapist. And I always say to people that there is a little bit of a difference that's more than body-centered focus with a somatic therapist. We're actually trained to view how the sociocultural impacts every aspect of your life. And so when you show up to a somatic therapist, they're going to ask you questions that are both personal, but we're going to bring in that flair of the political and the socio-political. And we bring in, how does that interact with your body, your story, your trauma? And we're gauging, where is their personal responsibility and where is the release of that, so you can acknowledge the system around you and then navigate the system that will never change with more consciousness and more gentleness and more awareness. So that's how I might describe my work. I'm also very transparent that I came to this profession through my own history of trauma and healing and integration. And everything that I offer and have trained in are things that I directly experienced as a client that did work for me. And I had parts of me that were like, why didn't that CBT work for me? But internal family systems did work for me. I want to figure out what's the difference, what's the ingredient that is different in that training, or how clinicians are trained and such forth. So when you look through my CV, it's really, these are the things that worked for me.
The reason I'm smiling so much is because I feel exactly the same way. Like, I didn't find the light bulb moments with CBT that I know some people do. Whereas for me, schema therapy, IFS parts therapy, and then more of the trauma work for me was where everything was just like, yes, yes, yes. And before we get into you today as a psychotherapist, it says on your website, human first, psychotherapist second. And I read that and I was like, that is really so special, because we learn by walking through the fire, right? And it's the practitioners that can really say, like, I've lived this, that I give other people permission to really share the mess and the shame and, yeah, the darkness. Do you want to tell me a tiny bit about your journey before we get into you as a psychotherapist and a therapist?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that you pick apart that piece, because coming from North America and spending a lot of time working with clients there and training there, you are in many ways advocated to show your humanness. And when I came to the UK, that was something that professionally was quite challenging for me. I would show up and want to meet people and be quite friendly, and psychotherapists be quite cold or have this professional identity. And I understand the meaning behind that and how it can be really important to be a blank slate. It gives the client an opportunity to explore their projections and how they interpret you, because they don't have any data points. I didn't have that opportunity coming into the field of the psychotherapist because I had spent time in the entertainment industry. And when I say that, people always make a story pretty quickly that growing up in the entertainment industry or dancing or modeling or being Miss Canada would be what gave me trauma. There were experiences in there were absolutely not okay for a 15-year-old to be navigating by themselves. But it was my experiences before that, more deeply rooted in intergenerational trauma, gender-based violence at home, that led me to pursue that industry so relentlessly. I had a very deep belief that if I presented perfectly, all that stuff that hurt me would go away. And it was when I was kind of at that moment of my career. I was just turned 19, had a Miss Canada title, which is very rare. Girls usually don't win that type of title until they're in their mid-20s. And I had this moment where I was like, you know what, on paper, everything is perfect. And I feel absolutely broken and shattered. And that was the moment where I was like, I'm going to dedicate all of these resources that I've gained through my body and leveraging my body as an object in this industry to figure out how I actually feel inside, because I know that something isn't right. And so that's the catalyst of my career in becoming a psychotherapist, is really deeply rooted in understanding pain and being so open with my clients that it's hard and it's messy and we're human and it's always going to be. It's just how much tenderness and love can we show ourselves through that.
Oh, that point around tenderness and love really hits home for me because, like you said, the British culture, it's like, don't show emotion, don't be expressive. People call me crazy sometimes. Like in the nail salon the other day, this woman asked my sister, like, oh, are you crazy like her? And I got really upset and really frustrated by it because I was like, why do people call me crazy just because I can express myself, just because I'm fun and because I will express energy? But we live in a culture here, particularly in the UK, where it's like, don't do that. Whereas in North America, like I love going to New York, I love going to LA because you walk down the street and people are like, your fucking outfit goes so hard, you look so fucking good. Whereas in England, people will just silently like side eye their friends and be like, what is she wearing? So it was when I found my second therapist, who was, like you said, warm and tender and loving, that I was like, I've met my match here. But where I would love to go just now before we move on is going into your journey a bit further, if you're okay with that. Because I think that moment that you experienced where you had achieved achievement at such a young age, such an incredible title, things that girls would dream of, give their right arm for, you got that. You got it so young. But there was still this feeling, like you said, like, I'm broken. Now, I'd love to just dig into like how that showed up and how that felt, because I'm sure so many people can relate, but maybe don't feel like they're broken because maybe they can't go there.
I think for me, what was really stark in that experience, in that moment specifically for me, is that I couldn't see that I had something based on my conditioning, my Eurocentric version of beauty and body ideals. I didn't feel like I fit, but I knew that I was there. So I must have something. Like, that was my 18-year-old, 19-year-old mind. But I would look to these women who were so astonishingly beautiful and accomplished and see themselves torturing their bodies and not eating and abusing different diet pills. And that was actually the moment. It was the external seeing other women really hurt themselves that made me go, there's nothing at the end of this road. Even the people that are presented to be so perfect are in deep pain. I'm headed down the wrong path. And that was the moment for me. There was no body-based connection, really. I didn't have that type of intimacy with myself or capacity to self-reflect, but I could see it externally in other women. And then that became my momentum.
That's so interesting because you essentially were seeing something at such a young age. When I was 18 or 19, I was drinking, taking drugs. I was making so many bad decisions, which has been a huge part of my therapy journey, is bringing love and compassion to that version of me. But it's amazing that you were able to see like, this doesn't end well for me, and decided to make a change. Do you think that even the girls around you had any self-awareness, or was it just this inherent belief, like, I have to get there, I have to be skinnier, I have to be prettier, then I will win the title, and then I will be happy?
Yes and no. So this is one place that I often speak with my clients that's a little bit different and hasn't entered the narrative of how we conceptualize disassociation. So yes, there's disassociation, dorsal vagal shutdown, parasympathetic response, you leave your body. I love that. But that theory really comes from predominantly white, cis, heterosexual men who don't live in a female body. So what I often advocate for my clients or encourage them to think about are the different variances of disassociation that women have. One of them being is that I can totally leave my body and go over here because of a trauma response, but I can also disconnect from how I'm feeling and yield my body as an object. There are some men in that experience, absolutely. Gabor Mate and Peter Levine, don't really talk about them, even though I hold them with such high esteem. But that is a different level of disassociation, a different place of leaving the body. And that piece is definitely what I was in. So I hadn't fully gone, but I was using my body as an object. There's no self-connection there, but there is still an awareness of the bodies in some way. And that is the piece that I often find I'm doing psychoeducation with my clients around of like, okay, maybe dorsal vagal shutdown, freeze response doesn't resonate with you, but can you see the ways that you're using your body as an object, not as a piece of deep wisdom or insight for you to use to access your authenticity?
Oh, and we're going to get into that body-based connection and that piece of self-intimacy. But I think let's go deeper into this using your body as an object. Like, it's not something that we've maybe really gone into on the podcast. So I'd love to go there. And I think in our father wound episodes, we have spoken about how often we can lead with sex when we want to lead with love. And really, we feel like we maybe don't believe that we're worthy of love or affection from someone, but maybe if we give them our body, maybe if we can make them fall in love with us through intimacy or through sex or being sexy and cute, that maybe we will get where we feel that we need to go. Can you talk me through, I guess, what is going on there, or maybe some other examples of how, as women, we experience this objectification of our bodies, maybe without us even being aware until we're listening to today's podcast?
Yeah, I think it is so subtle that actually having an awareness of how you're objectified is an inherently hard thing to hold. And I'm so grateful again for Gabor and his teachings and how he's been impacted my life directly, because he does talk about the sociocultural. He does kind of start to sprinkle it in, but he doesn't necessarily sprinkle it in such a way where you start to think, okay, yes, my body keeps the score of traumatic experiences, but it's also keeping the score of sociological expectations and societal expectations as well. That piece isn't part of the conversation. So when we start to have a conversation around sexuality, how I'm embodying my sexuality, how I see myself out there, we start to get into these questions of like, what does it mean when every day we encounter about 74 gigabytes of data, which is equivalent to 16 movies, and all of that is focused mostly sexualized content. Wow. But we don't actually have a felt or representation of what sexuality is. Sexuality is seen as an object in images. So I'm going to start to embody that with or without my choice. And so to actually be in relation to how we objectify ourselves is a forever practice. It's very hard. It's very confronting because it can bring up shame of like, maybe I shouldn't use my body in this way. Maybe I shouldn't use my sexuality to get this relationship. And it doesn't have to bring shame. It's like none of us created this system. We're all within it. Our bodies are all impacted by it. Can I just choose consciously? If this is how I feel, this is the only way I can get what I want, can I at least be tender and gentle with myself around that choice? And because if we don't have that tenderness and gentleness, then the shame, then the guilt, then there's something wrong with me. And it's like, actually, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just in a system that isn't actually designed for you to be deeply connected to yourself or to view your body as anything else just yet.
I love how you said it's so subtle that sometimes we don't even realize that it's going on, because a lot of what I've realized in the last few years is I truly believe as women, we are just brainwashed by society to feel like if I'm skinnier or if I'm prettier or if I'm richer, life will be easier. And having been very skinny at some points of my life and having been arguably prettier at different points in my life and having made more money at different points in my life, none of those things brought me closer to true happiness and true contentment. Let's talk about that kind of subtle belief. Like, what is going on there? Is it that I'm not happy at the place I'm in now? So if I get somewhere else, then everything's magically going to work out for me? Like Cinderella story is over there. I just have to get there. I think a lot of people would relate to this.
Yeah. The question I always ask my clients when they come in is, what is your definition of success? Have you actually taken the time to ask yourself, what is a successful life for me? Because it's so common that all of us end up in that vortex. If I just achieve more, if I just lose more weight, if I just do this, then the happiness will come. There's nothing that abnormal about that type of narrative in our hustle culture as it is right now. But actually having the capacity to stop long enough and feel whatever has happened that has led you to strive so much, that is hard. And that is oftentimes the biggest piece of the psychotherapy process when someone comes into my office. I'm like, we just need to stop. all of the things, so then you can actually write a definition of authenticity, of success, of how you want to live your life, how you want to feel that's true to you. But you won't know that until you actually stop doing whatever you're doing right now, because it's not going to lead you where you want to go. It's going to lead you where your mind thinks you need to go.
Oh, that point around you just have to slow down, you just have to stop. It's been such a huge part of my journey. I'm just very aware now how it's so easy for me just to work harder and do this and fly here and do that. Do you see this across the board today, that like we're just in this epidemic of like being unable to stop, slow down, and most importantly, turn inwards?
Yeah, definitely. The words that come to my mind is dangerously disembodied. Like we're moving so fast that the consequences of that are everywhere in our lives. And if we actually connect to our bodies, we will be forced to slow down. Where that becomes tricky, and there's a hard sell there, is oftentimes people have a conception, if I do slow down, I connect to myself, I know my inner voice, I'm going to be less successful, achieve less, I'm not going to meet my goals, XYZ is going to happen to my body, which isn't true. It's actually the striving and the pushing and the doing more that's creating more of the stress and more of the problem and more of the chaos that follows you. And when we actually slow down, we have more capacity to achieve more. One of my favorite teachers, she would always say to me, a meditation teacher, slow down, you'll get there faster. And then nothing has been more true in my life than those words.
Wow, that's really, really powerful, as well as what was the other statement you said? Dangerously disembodied. Yeah. I'm like, damn, that's something I've never heard before. And that has hit hard for me. And I think that's such a powerful statement. Why do you think it is that we just can't slow down? Because the more research I've done into this is we're just not taught to sit with those sensations that happen internally in the body. And so we disconnect, we go into our head, and that's where we come into thinking and overthinking. Talk me through, kind of for someone that maybe isn't so well aware with the concept of embodiment, maybe that distinction between in the body, in the head, and why we don't like being in the body.
Mm-hmm. The reasons why someone disconnects from their body are as unique as a fingertip. And I always really push that forward, that the reasons why you have left are so specific to you. I will never fully understand. And if you are lucky, you will come to fully understand one day. But it's so complicated and complex because our mind filters through 0.00001% of the information around us. Our body filters through all the rest. So it has all of that somatic information inside of us, just like waiting to make the next decision or waiting to make the next impulse or intuitive response. It has that data point. And so what that also means is that it's also holding a lot of stuff that we've pretended was okay or fine, microaggressions, systemic oppression. It's holding all that. And so when we actually go in, we are confronted with our intergenerational trauma or the things we've brushed off as okay, or how that woman on the street side-eyed us because of our fancy outfit. We have to feel that. And because we have such a strong culture of physical pain being prioritized over psychological pain, when you go in and you're confronted with that, we have no narrative and no language to actually express what we're feeling or the pain we are finally confronting. And that becomes another barrier to actually creating connection to the body. Because we do have some narrative around trauma, big T trauma, little t trauma, we can get into that. We don't necessarily have such a narrative on how our daily lives impact our relationship to our body and lead us to be overwhelmed.
Oh, wow. And I think overwhelmed is the word there. What I've found is the more overwhelmed I am outside of us, instead of going in and unpacking that, it's like, historically, what could I grab for outside of me to take away the overwhelm? And for me, that's often working. It's often exercising, not so much now because I'm on this journey. For other people, it can be food, sex, scrolling. There's so many different variations of that. And what I would find is I thought I was really good with my emotions. I'm great with my emotions. I'm emotional, blah, blah, blah. But my chronic pain disorder would tell you otherwise because my body was screaming at me that I wasn't doing something. And then what I would find is when I would be emotional, it would be like so much emotion would come out and I'd be crying or I'd be angry that then in turn, you feel ashamed of that.
so you disconnect further. Is that something you also see? Like when you do let it out, it's so scary for people that you're just like, no, let's just put it back in the box, lock it up, throw away the key.
Totally. In that case, if we take the theory of the window of tolerance, people are pendulating from hyper arousal to hypo arousal. So they're at the top of that window where they have all the anxiety, they're doing all the things, da, 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 da. They have no emotional connection because they're so in that busy body, busy mind. And then as soon as you hit a plateau there, because everything that goes up must come down, you'll bottom out. And that is when you have that large cathartic emotional expression. You will have that release, and then you'll go into your dorsal vagal shutdown. You'll have a lack of emotion again. You'll think you're back to normal. As you start to move out, the shame will come. The shame will push you back into overacting, into that hyperarousal again, anxiety, doing, trying to compensate for what just happened. And here we go.
Oh, so it's just like a never-ending cycle until you decide to face it, look at it, understand it. Where do you think the first stage of healing even starts? I know it's so different for everyone.
I do pretty firmly believe the first stage of healing happens with connection. In the essence that even in this conversation, in about less than 30 seconds, your mirror neurons and my mirror neurons connected, and our central nervous systems got to know each other and they started to regulate and find coherence. A really good trained psychotherapist will be able to go, oh, there's a shift. Is this mine? Is that theirs? What is this? They'll ask that question. And why I say healing begins there is that if you can find someone who is deeply regulated, you'll be able to actually have some of that transference. They'll be able to support you in that internal angst and ideally break that pattern with you. I always tell my clients, like, psychotherapy is lots of things, but in my office, it's also a practice of love. I'm lending you my nervous system so that yours can learn something new.
That's so sweet. And that is really amazing. You know, I always say, yeah, healing happens with connection, but it wasn't until being in my current relationship now with the most calm, stable, regulated person that I've ever met that I started, like you said, to be able to have that safety almost for me to unravel. But he is able to hold those emotions. And I always say to people that he loves me more for them. There's no element of, this is too much, you shouldn't be doing this. And when someone gives you permission to let that out and to let it go, you start to realize that actually it needs to come out. It doesn't need to be inside. But I also am very aware that I never want people to think that the answer is in relationship, is in love. Let's talk about someone that's listening to this and they aren't in a relationship. How does connection look for that type of person? Because we're not saying like you have to find your soulmate to be able to heal at all.
Definitely not. I'm very strongly like, you don't need to find a partner to heal, but you do need to find someone who can offer some type of safe, compassionate, tender care. Doesn't have to be the same consistent person. It can be someone so random. I even think of one person at my meditation studio who would always just ask me if I wanted a cup of tea, like the simplest thing. And through that, I learned like consistency and generosity and them continuously showing up. And so it was that was also, so just inviting people to look for those small moments of connection where it pulls them out of themselves because they do feel something different with that other person, and then leaning into finding more and more places that offer that.
Oh, yeah. I love that idea that actually healing can be anywhere. The connection can be anywhere and it can appear at any time. And I would always say that, yeah, the moment I found that therapist was like the first part of that journey for me. But it got amplified by the people that then came after, because that first therapist taught me I can hold space for these emotions. And actually, not only can I hold space for these emotions, but what you're experiencing, Louise, this isn't uncommon. You know, when you're holding trauma and deep shame and stories, you feel like no one is ever going to understand. You know, it's so dark in here. You know, how could I share this with you and you understand? But actually, since doing this podcast, I realized we all have that inside of us. We all have these stories inside of us. And actually, when you start to share in warm, loving spaces, you realize that we're all here going through the same thing. We're just not talking about it. And before, towards the back of this episode, where we maybe get into more of the actionable tips and tricks and things like that, I would love to just touch on this point around shame. Because what I've seen since doing this work is people having this feeling, a feeling inside of them that something isn't quite right, and they've tried to achieve the goals, they've tried to get there thinking that will alleviate that feeling, and it doesn't. And maybe it's showing up as anxiety, maybe it's showing up as depression, maybe it's just a feeling that they're scared to be seen, or maybe they don't even know what it is. Do you think that that can stem from shame? You know, what is this silent, corrosive experience that we can feel that we're never really taught what it is?
The first piece in my mind is differentiating the difference between shame, which is I am inherently bad and wrong, and guilt, which is I've done something bad or wrong. Guilt is a very healthy emotion. It's actually a little alarming when people don't have guilt. I'm like, oop, what's going on over here? Shame, though, is so pervasive and so subtle and so interwoven into our society that it's really hard to pick apart as one of the reasons why we might have anxiety or feel disconnected from our bodies or not know exactly what's going on. Like I mentioned, all of the data we have every day, all the marketing, all the technology, all that stuff that's coming into our awareness is constantly or is premised off a message that we aren't good enough or that something is wrong with us. And then you have that message out there, and maybe you have experiences where you didn't feel enough, or you were told you weren't good enough, or you were compared to someone else. That's going to get activated again and again and again. And usually these experiences aren't abundantly conscious because they're so subtle and there's so many of them that's why they've created this, or they're not conscious because perhaps they did come from trauma, and that trauma is so deeply painful that it's been repressed and pushed away very far in the psyche. I am not one of those people who their experiences of trauma was pushed away very, very far, but intimate details of it were. But I did have that experience of always knowing that's why I hated myself so much, because I remembered what happened to me, and I remembered and believed that it was because of who I was inherently at my core. But I do think, and I have seen with clients, that can be cut off.
I'm really grateful for you saying such a bold statement as that was why I hated myself, because again, that's where the healing lies. People just hearing you saying that out loud will be so healing for them. You know, we are not taught that we can even say that out loud, you know? So that's just so powerful, you saying that. And I think it's been a huge part of my journey as well, and everyone's journey. It's just people don't admit that out loud. And everyone else's lives look perfect because of the social media and because of the X, Y, and Z. But actually the intensity of these internal experiences that we are all experiencing make us feel like we're the only person dealing with it. But we're not. We're really not. And I want to shift now into talking about the people with the busy brains, the overthinkers, the worriers, I'm just so busy all the time that I never have to slow down. I never have to, actually feel. We might think, but we won't feel. How do you relate to the phrase that overthinking is actually underfeeling in the body?
I think that there are varying degrees of truth to it, but there's nuance. That can be true for some people. Absolutely. Like, my mind has taken over because this is so overwhelming, or I can't access it, or I need to disconnect from it. But there are also people where this is still so overwhelming or so disconnected that their mind is completely shut off. And I have a lot of those people come into my office where they're like, well, I don't have a busy mind. I don't have rapid thoughts. I have no thoughts.
Can't relate.
Right? And there is no narrative out there for these people, but they have the same level of disconnection. What has happened, though, is that this is so overwhelming. Their mind has gone, I can't process this. I'm going to think of the coffee cup I have to pick up and use. And there's no extra voice inside anymore. And then through our work together, it is finding that other voice. So I think that one specific pattern of mind-body holism has really taken off, but it's not the only one. And so I always kind of caution, there are other ones out there. This isn't always how this goes. You can underfeel and have no thoughts as well. Incredible. You can also overfeel in your body and have no thoughts as well.
Interesting. Yes, I love the nuance. The nuance is so important. And I think we're missing some of that in the online social media and coaching world, is that you can look online and it can just be the answer to everything is regulate your nervous system, or the answer to everything is release your trauma. And actually it's so much more nuanced than that. for someone that is in shutdown, they shouldn't be doing intense release because then it's going to overwhelm their system that's already overwhelmed. For you, what does it mean to feel an emotion? That's such a huge abstract question, right? But everyone's like, you've got to feel it to heal it. You have to go through it. Where should we even start to get into this?
It is such a question. As someone who has a master's degree in somatic studies, which means that I spent 2 years studying the theory of somatics, and then I went off and did the somatic training and the actual practical application of it and the experiential. From a theory standpoint, I find those statements very hard for me to engage with because feeling an emotion is a deeply intimate experience. You work with any client and you're going to learn that very quickly. Tell me to describe your sadness. You're going to get like an image. You're going to get my toes hurt. You're going to get a dream, but there'll be consistency. And then you're like, okay, tell me more. I'll use oftentimes Peter Levine's SIBAM, so sensation, image, behavior, affect, and memory, just try and like flesh that out. So for me, describing an emotion, such an abstract question, is a bodily based sensation. It isn't for everyone though. And I really hold space for those people where it is an image. And it's like, that's totally fine. That doesn't mean you're disconnected from your body. If we take a somatic approach, we deeply honor the unconscious is stored in all of our body. All that 0.0001 information is in here, and it's going to present differently to each of us at different times, and it's going to show up differently. So emotion is also described in that way. We're going to have different language for it.
Yeah, and the first time that you do somatic experiencing or somatic therapy, people are often like, what the fuck is this? Because the therapist is saying like, and where do you feel that in your body? And if you are in your head, I remember being like, I don't fucking feel it in my body anywhere. I feel some butterflies in my stomach because like I have anxiety because this is like a deeply uncomfortable experience. But the more that you start to practice and the more that you start to drop into your body, what I have found is you start to make friends with those sensations and start to be able to learn their language. For someone today that's listening to this who's thought, okay, talk therapy, I loved it, I understand myself better, but XYZ, something is still showing up, a pattern, a symptom, a cycle, a behavior, a response, a coping mechanism, the list goes on and on. They want to go deeper. Where would you advise them to start on this journey?
I love your question because I deeply honor traditional therapy. I often start there. And I have clients who like want to rush to the somatics. They're like, I've done this with someone else. Like, I want to drop into the story. I'm like, whoa, wait. Your nervous system needs to learn mine. And I need to really make sure, do my due diligences as a practitioner, that you have made a story of meaning from your experiences of pain. I need to know the narrative so that when I invite you to feel into that horrific nightmare, I already know where we're kind of going because I know your story. And I get very weary when people are like, I'm just going to go into a somatic processing thing or this, that by myself, or are exclusively doing that with practitioners who don't know the story. Because what we do know is that cathartic release can feel very similar to integration, but it's not the same thing. You can have all the cathartic releases in the world. You can have those peak experiences. We don't talk about disassociative expansive states, which can feel like healing, but they're not integrated. Actual healing is that deep slowing down, that core steady feeling of embodiment. And so if I don't know someone's story, if I haven't done that narrative work, it's very likely I'm going to lead them into a disassociative expansive state, a total dorsal vagal shutdown, or they're just going to have a cathartic release, which is great. Peter Levine does talk about that when he talks about kind of releasing trauma. He's talking a little bit about that, but it's that place of integration that I'm really looking for. So I always tell people when they're like, where do I start? I'm like, well, where are you right now? What do you know about your own story? What activates you? Where do you have responses that don't make sense to you? Where does your intuition go off? Like, I want to know these things. And ultimately, I want them to start to be curious about them too, because they lead their healing, not me.
I love this because I think we see it a lot with maybe plant medicine, for example, and living in Tulum, there's a lot of this around me. You will see people that will be like, yeah, that was my 30th ayahuasca trip. And I'm sat there thinking, interesting, why the need for 30? And I think what I see is how, what was that phrase you used? Disassociative?
Expansive.
Okay, we're going to go into that because I need to know more about that. But I look back at my life and it was like all the times that I was running this or doing that or working towards that, really I was just disembodied, I was disconnected, and I was distracted. So like the 3Ds. And it's interesting because some people today with somatics, they just want to release it and then they want to move on with their life, but they are not connecting to release. Mm-hmm. Is that kind of what you're saying? Is like you have to be able to go in and with safety, be able to tolerate the sensations and sit with the story to then be able to safely move through the story and then to inevitably release and integrate the aftermath in like a kind of holding yourself rather than just being like, oh, I'm going to just take ayahuasca and like going to find myself on the other side.
Yeah. I had a little bit of a chuckle there because you don't know this about me, but I was so deeply immersed in plant medicine.
Wow, I didn't know
for a
that.
really long time. I used to work for a company on their ketamine-assisted psychotherapy protocols, did my training with MAPS and MDMA.
Of course, because you have every training under the sun. Incredible.
And that comes from my own lived experience of using those medicines in my own healing journey. And then I definitely got lost in the ayahuasca. I've had ayahuasca more times than I could tell you because I got lost in that like cathartic release. And I was being told that this was healing and da-da-da-da. But then I would like leave and be like, my life is in shambles. Like, what is going on here? But these peak experiences were so addictive. And for my disassociative expansive parts, they loved it. They're like, we're healing. This is oneness with the universe. No, this is you escaping the reality of your life right now. So I could go off on a side tangent about that piece, but I will kind of come back to your question about release. One thing that I find sticky with clients is I'll have them come in, they're like, I want to release my trauma. And I'm like, I love that for you. Like, I am all here. And that's not how that works. Peter Levine talks about releasing discharge energy from the nervous system. None of them speak about releasing trauma. Yeah. That's not what they're talking about. It's a really cute, sexy, marketable idea, but it's not the truth of how this works. Every single experience you have leaves a residue on you. And so my job as a psychotherapist is to find those residues with you, get curious about them, create enough containment and safety and compassion that you can ask yourself the question, what do I want to do with this now? Do I want to put it under the rug? If you want to put it under the rug, well, all the power to you. I've got my own things under that rug that I'm like, we don't need to go there. Or do I want to make this my life's deepest meaning? Do I want this to influence my life? How do I want to show it up? That is ideally more of like the release. The release is getting to recreate the narrative around it, if I'm going to use that language at all, and how I perceive that as it's presented online.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And I'm grateful you sharing about the ayahuasca. That's just like a nice little tidbit to add in because I wasn't aware of that. But yeah, I think, in a world of TikTok today, there's just so many buzzwords. Trauma, regulation, release. And as someone that has spent 15 years trying to get to the bottom of my chronic pain disorder, the answers were exactly what you have just shared, is that it wasn't necessarily releasing the suppressed emotion or releasing the trapped emotion. It wasn't really the anger or the guilt. And yes, those things needed to be looked at and worked through. But from a physical perspective, what I've realized, it was the undischarged energy of the cycles of emotion that I was not allowing to complete their cycle. And for me, that was because I didn't feel that in my family unit, and this is very subconscious, that I could finish those cycles. Because like I said at the beginning, it's like, oh, she's crazy if she has an emotion. And my father's on the autism spectrum. So even the tiniest amount of emotion for him is just like so overwhelming. I mean, he has to leave the cinema if there's a spider on the screen, like bless his cotton socks. So a big part of my journey has been understanding, yes, even though I don't consciously remember it, my body didn't feel safe to finish those energetic cycles. Is that kind of more of the nuance that you're sort of talking about with regard to the trapped emotions and stuff like that.
Some of the nuance of that cycle. And one piece where my just life experience has been different. So in the essence of you sharing, having that trapped energy, I trained as a dancer. So even though I didn't have language for what was happening to my body and the violence and how horrific that was, I got dropped for like 30 hours a week at a dance studio where I just got to release and process and move. And yes, it was strict and they weren't always kind to me and it wasn't a great experience, but my body got to do the thing it wanted to do. It got to move the energy. And I really look back at it and I'm like, that is what saved my life. Because I had that space to just move my body in whatever way, fit my teacher's desires. But I got to have expression in that by pushing the limits and having that expression. And so for me, some of that language around release doesn't really, I'm like, well, I got to do that the whole time. Like, there isn't this stuff that's really waiting there, but I do hear it in my clients and that place of needing that time to really learn how to do that in your body and that you can as well.
I feel like you've just unlocked a piece of my healing journey for me because I also was a dancer when I was younger and then I became a gymnast. So like you, 30 hours a week, every week. And I've just realized that I stopped doing my gymnastics when I was 16 and my chronic pain disorder started when I was 17. And I've never, ever, and I've got goosebumps, which I always know the universe saying, yeah, that's the truth. I never connected the dots that actually, yes, I went through a big trauma at 18. Yes, that was very connected. But actually, I stopped moving my body. I wasn't doing the release that you said that you can do through dance. And I don't think people understand that you don't just release trauma through doing trauma release exercises and doing somatics, right? Talk me through some of the ways that you can become a healthier, more well-processed, well-rounded, happier, flow-based person.
I love this question because even though I wear a psychotherapy hat, I'm such a strong advocate for just getting out there in the world and living. Like, I love my clients dearly and I'm here to give them every tool and trick and that I know of. But I'm doing it with the intention that they get back out there and get out of my office and go live their life with the most open heart. So I always say to people, yes, you can do the trauma release thing. That's great. But you can also bring that intention to that Pilates class you really like, or going for a walk, or just like rolling on the ground, or like whatever else you want to do. For me, boxing has been amazingly cathartic. I love it.
I love boxing. We'll have to go boxing sometime together. 100%.
So it is the intentionality that you're bringing behind the action that's more important than the action itself.
I love this because recently I created a somatic Pilates concept because what I was realizing is Pilates was great, helped me work to balance my hormones, but I wasn't being mindful whilst I was doing it. And Pilates is all based around the breath. And I just felt like I was looking at the computer screen and I wasn't embodied whilst I was doing it. So I then hybrided it with a breath practice to bring you into your body. And that's something that I've been working on recently. And I know that you've been working on something recently too. You have an exciting project coming out soon. I don't know if you're allowed to share about it on here.
I can a little bit.
Okay,
I want to go back to the somatic Pilates though, because I used to actually teach in a Pilates teacher training, trauma-informed Pilates.
No way.
And I would give them language and certain exercises. And if you're working with individuals that identify as a woman, where is more likely sexual trauma going to be in the body? So it was like a huge part of my journey also was working.
Where was that?
That was in Canada, in Vancouver.
It's funny you say that because the two practitioners that I launched this concept with, both are trauma-informed Pilates instructors from Canada.
Interesting.
So Canada's doing something,
there
right?
There you go. Yeah, I loved that work. And then when I moved to the UK, it just wasn't as possible. But yes, right now I am working on something else. I'm writing a book, which I'm so excited about. And it really goes into, for women, how, yes, your body holds the score of all your traumatic experiences, but how it also holds the score of every societal expectation, every experience of gender-based violence, all your intergenerational trauma, how it goes into much more of that nuance, which for me, I'm so excited about because these are the conversations I get to have with my clients. And this is what I get to invite them into being aware of, because when you create a relationship with your body, it's a level of intimacy you won't have with anything else or anyone else. And therefore you have to confront all of that stuff that's inside.
All of that stuff. And it is within all of us. And I guess now, as we come to wrap up, and we'll put the information of the book in the show notes, I'm sure lots of people will come and read it because you've already taught me so much from today's episode. So thank you so much. If people are like, okay, where do I go next? We've spoken about how it's great to get a one-on-one therapist. It's great to get a one-on-one practitioner. Let's talk more about the things that you can do on a daily basis, in the 5 seconds between the call and the coffee, in the moment you open your eyes, before you go to sleep, when you feel the sensations rising in your body. Are there any particular practices that are like non-negotiable for you? How does your daily life look that you're like, this could be great for someone else as well?
I could give the classic answer of like mindfulness and breath work and some like yoga or movement. Yes, those are all great and they're all integrated into my life. What really started to shift things for me, and it's so simple, you don't need anything else but you, is starting to really hear my inner voice. And when I heard that voice of judgment or voice driven by shame, to actually pause and stop and go, okay, mind, thank you for that story. I hear that you're working really hard right now to make me feel like I'm not enough. Why? Can you let my body speak to me? It takes like 30 seconds to just be like, I hear that you're telling me I need to send 5,000 emails right now. Thank you. I will get to them. Can you let someone else speak right now? And just that little subtle. And how I speak to my clients, this is the thing I'm most proud of. How I speak to my clients is how I speak inside my own mind now. Coming from someone who had so much self-hatred and so much judgment, but it was that practice. It's so simple. It's unbelievably hard. But as I always say to my clients, you can have a hard life or you can do a few hard things. That is a hard thing to do, but it is simple.
I absolutely love that, because I think that there is so much self-love narrative out there today. Just love yourself. Just do this. And
I don't know what that means.
Right. And I always say that. I say, no one ever taught us to love ourselves.
No.
So how can we just do it at age 30, 35, 40, 50, 60, 70? And I love that you've just given that trick, which is start by listening to the voice in your head, softly, gently, quietly, and dropping into the body. Does that come next? Like dropping into the body to see the sensation that is attached to whatever it is that is driving the voice in the head.
It will take time for your mind to kind of start responding to like, what's this other voice that's like asking me a question? Like, what's going on in here? But there will start being this other voice, this more authentic voice that starts to emerge. And that will come oftentimes with sensation.
Yeah, that's perfect. And this is exactly what I was hoping we would get from today's episode, because it's always just feel your feelings, regulate this. But actually, you've just given us two very tangible pieces of advice there, which start in the head, start in the body. And it's about consistency, right? Like on a daily basis now, I find myself actively taking 2 seconds to drop down. I'm very in my head. My breathing used to be very dysfunctional. Didn't even realize it. Short, sharp, shallow. And that simple coming down practice for me has been really profound.
Yeah, I've had so many clients that have struggled with the feel your feelings, or you need to feel it to heal it. Because if you don't have a container or a mental narrative or someone supportive, you go in to feel things and you're just overwhelmed. And then what? You're in the same experience that traumatized you or was painful before. It's like we need to structure that and work with what we have. And oftentimes we do have a strong mind in our society, so we can start to leverage that to then actually, because eventually when you start asking those questions, you are going to get feeling, but you're going to have a dialogue internally that will support you working through what you're feeling if you don't have access to someone else.
I love it that you said you can get overwhelmed, because that's what pushes you straight back into your head. You're like, nope, this is unsafe. This is exactly what happened before, even if that's like on the biological level, not on the like conscious mind level. So I think that that's powerful. And so is the consistency and the community and the connection that we've spoken about today. As a final point, do you feel like there's anything that we've missed that you would be amiss if you didn't mention it as part of today's discussion?
I don't think so, but I will circle back to, if people do look for a psychotherapist, I really invite them to try and find someone that offers safe love. Just safe love. Like, this is a practice of safe love. It's professionally boundaried. It's dedicated towards you. And then that can be your template in which you go out into the rest of the world and you've learned how to receive something. That is what I would advocate for people to learn, or to look for, and to learn to have.
That is so beautiful. I feel like you've literally just hit me with the biggest mic drop moment of the whole podcast at the end. Safe love. It's not until we start doing this work that we can love ourselves safely, and we can allow others to love us safely, and we can choose safe love rather than I don't want to say just abusive, but the critical, controlling, disembodied, disconnected love outside of us that often actually reflects what is going on within us. Do you think that's fair to say, that it can often be a reflection?
Yeah, I use the word reflection because reflection offers the possibility that it's something we could move into instead of a mirror. I really push back on I chose this partner who's chaotic because I'm internally chaotic. It's like, we're not mirrors, but we're reflections. We could have a state quite similar that we ourselves don't know yet and aren't conscious around and don't know how to contain. This person is reflecting that to us. It doesn't mean that we are that, though.
And everything can change at any moment. And the future is for people to create.
Yeah.
They can heal. Thank you so much. This has been so nice. I didn't even look at the questions once, which is amazing. We absolutely went exactly where we were supposed to go. So thank you so much for joining us. I've loved having you here. I love your energy. I love your knowledge. I love your insight and wisdom. And we will link all of your details in the show notes. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for creating this. It's so important.
My pleasure. Thank you.